Hey everybody, welcome to the Obsidian Paranormal Podcast. I'm Myron.
And I'm Jillian.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing our investigation of what we refer to as the College House.
We call it the College House because it's a really cute house where our friend Rochelle owned it, and her son was in college at the time, and he and a couple of friends all stayed there. So college kids, College House.
So this was our first investigation, having Rochelle as a guest, and she came on a few other investigations after this.
Yeah, she was a really solid investigator from the start, so we were happy to welcome her on future investigations whenever there was a spot.
And other than her, it was just me, Jillian, and Rochelle's son, Jaron.
Yeah, and Jaron had a little bit of paranormal investigation experience. He had his own REM pod and a music box that would activate whenever there was some spirit activity similar to a REM pod. So that was nice for us to try out some different equipment.
Since this is a private residence, we're not going to give too much away as far as the location or anything, but we'll give you a little bit of history. One of the things that we did discover is that it was built in 1900.
Yeah, it's on a dirt road, and there's a cemetery right next to the property, too. The house is in a historic town in New England. It's another factory town, and it's alongside a river. And in New England, a lot of factories were built alongside rivers because it provided ways to move the goods around. It provided some, unfortunately, dumping of waste into a convenient place. Glad that practice is no longer a thing. But it really does have a rich history in this town that's very similar to a lot of New England towns' history and origins.
So this property had a couple things going for it. There's the running water from the river. There's a cemetery nearby, which both of those things can contribute.
Absolutely. There's no secret where Stephen King got a lot of his inspiration. New England is just spooky. And this particular house was definitely creeping out these college kids. So they did come to their mom about some of the claims of activity. And then their mom, Rochelle, came to us and said, hey, can you help out? So, Myron, what were some of those claims of activity?
Well, I know one was that one of the roommates has said that he's seen what he says is a spirit of a little girl in the bedroom. He's felt targeted in general. There is the upstairs attic, which is, I would say, my favorite part of the house as far as activity goes and the creepy factor, because there's two spots up there where there's chairs. One of them is like an old chair, like all dusty and stuff, and it's facing a window. And the other one is off on its own in a little corner, and there's nothing around it, and it just looks like something you would see in a horror movie. And some of the activity reported up there is one of the chairs moving on its own. Like they'll come upstairs, and the next time they come up, it's in a different spot.
It was definitely one of those attics where you could imagine Norman Bates's mom living up there and just looking out the window at everything. We did not find Norman Bates's mom, thank goodness, but definitely that type of creep factor up there.
They also have a shelf up there that has a bunch of old objects, so there could be a possibility something's attached to one of those.
Which was one of the questions that we did ask later on.
And there's also the feeling of being watched in the bathroom. And didn't they find something?
Yeah, they actually found an interesting object, and it was made out of hair. They didn't actually find this object in the bathroom, but it is something that the college kids got an uneasy feeling about. So when Rochelle approached us, she did let us know that they did find what could have been a fetish. Now, not that type of fetish. A fetish in the magical world is something that's usually made out of human hair or contains DNA from a person, and it's used very similar to a puppet. People also might know it as a voodoo doll, although it's found in different magical traditions other than voodoo. So a fetish is used as a representation of a person in order to enact magic upon that. So fetishes, puppets, voodoo dolls, they can all be used in different ways. So, as a magical practitioner myself, I do have poppets of people. I actually have a poppet of my best friend and future team member, Griffin. And with Griffin's permission, I will take her poppet out when she's stressed and give it a little back rub, tell it to relax. I'll put like nice calming essential oils on it and speak kindly to it. So when you find like a representation of somebody, it's not always indicative of malicious intent or malicious magic. It can actually be used as a representation to heal somebody or to give them good wishes. So this particular fetish that looked like human hair made into like a stick figure, it really made the college kids feel uneasy. So, I did talk to them about different ways that they could protect themselves and get rid of it. But that was one of the impetuses of why they wanted us to come and investigate. And especially since I'm a magical practitioner, they wanted my insight on that. If you do ever find something that looks like it could be a fetish or a poppet or something like that, you can always email us at obsidianparanormal@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to take a look at that. You can also set up your own protective magic. If you do find something like that, I always recommend you can't go wrong with putting it in some salt. Salt is a great neutralizer. So it's not always an ill intent, but they did feel that it wasn't on the up and up.
Are there any poppets in this house that I should be concerned about?
So that's it for the claims of activity. Speaking of we did have an interesting moment that related back to one of our favorite places, the Blue House Bagel Company and Cafe.
Which is funny because take into consideration that the investigation that we did right before this one was our second investigation of the Blue House Bagel Shop.
And we went into one of the roommates' bedroom with their permission to investigate. And there was a poster hanging on the wall that you would not expect in a college house room.
Actually, I can't think of any place where I would see this in somebody's house, but...
Yeah, there was a poster of all different types of bagels. What are the odds of having just come from the second investigation of the Blue House Bagel Company and Cafe, which is a couple episodes back if you want to go back and listen to it. And then the next, within like a month, we go to a house and posters of bagels in a college kid's house.
Which we had no knowledge of beforehand.
And I've never seen another bedroom or any place other than a bagel shop with a bagel poster. So this investigation, we set up in the way that we usually do. We did a walkthrough, we listened to the claims of activity, and we determined where to put our cameras. And one of the places that kind of gave the college kids some heebie-jeebies was down in the basement. Basements and attics are always kind of dusty and creepy. And there was something that we noticed during our setup that has actually helped us for future investigations.
Yeah, which is that when sometimes you turn off the light switch, it turns off the power to that room. So, or the outlets anyway. So one of the things that happened was turned off the light switch, turned off our camera, which we did not realize at first. And definitely helps us in the future because in future investigations, we checked that and there were places where we would have lost our video had we not known this.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a feature specifically in historic and older homes. I think new builds, they tend to not wire the outlets to the light switches because they're doing the overhead lighting. Why am I explaining construction again, Myron? Why does this always happen? But yeah, this one, we flipped the switch and Myron noticed right away. He's like, wait, did our camera just flicker off? And it really did save the investigation and future ones. So
And we started the investigation in the attic. And the majority of our evidence that we got up there, which we started getting pretty much right off the bat, was on the Estes.
Yeah, we did a double Estes session where you and our guest, Rochelle, were under at the same time. And from the get-go, Myron and Rochelle started talking to each other in the Estes, and they absolutely could not hear each other. They were far away from each other. And so Jaron and I were really excited and getting really ramped up because we were getting that feedback in real time, which is always exciting. So the first line of questioning that we started with was about one of the other roommates who really felt that he was targeted by whatever entities were in the house. So Jaron had asked, "Do you know this roommate?" And Rochelle replied, "I do." And then right after Rochelle said, "I do," Myron said, "hurt." So Jaron and I clarified, "Do you want to hurt the roommate?" And that's when Myron said, "Yes." And then we asked why, and then we didn't get a response. So we really wanted to figure out why they were targeting this one roommate over the others.
And for privacy reasons, we're not going to mention the roommate by name.
Right. And one of the things that came up was a discussion about alcohol. So one of the things with any type of substance that alters your state is it does make one more vulnerable and more susceptible to paranormal attention because it lowers the auric field and it lowers the natural ability for one to protect themselves. So that's one of the reasons why we have a strict no altered substances while on investigations policy. So when it came to light in these Estes sessions that this one roommate might be using alcohol more so than the other roommates knew or were catching on, we did ask again, does this roommate drink more than his roommates know? And Rochelle replied with, "Can't even," which sounds like a very modern response. But we kind of took it as maybe he does drink a little bit more than people let on. But then again, what college student doesn't drink a little bit more than they would want their parents to know about or want people to know about? So no judgment there, just, could have been what made him a target.
Aaron had asked if they know one of the other roommates, and the response was not, no, not. So we're not sure if the no would be KNOW or no, as in NO.
Yeah, that's one of the drawbacks of not having closed captioning on these responses is up to interpretation. Did they not know him? Or were they saying not, nope, not?
As far as the attic, that's pretty much all we got up there. And then the rest of the evidence we caught was in the rest of the house. We didn't get anything in the basement. We got a lot actually in the living room. Actually, I think the living room is where we got everything downstairs.
Oh, and the bathroom.
Oh, in the bathroom, yeah.
Another Jillian sitting on
Jillian's bathroom sessions.
Right. Closed lid, I promise.
All right, so while we were investigating the living room, Rochelle was under the Estes, and one of the questions Jillian had asked was, "Are you attached to a person or an object?" And Rochelle's response was, "No, people." So I'm assuming that means that she's not, whoever it is, isn't attached to a person but an object? Or are they saying, "No, I'm attached to people"? So
again, another up to interpretation.
But it sounds like a response either way, so.
Right. And then I believe I had asked, "Are you an ancient people?" And the response we got was, "We are." Now, I personally believe that if we were communicating with an ancient people, they didn't necessarily need to have known English in their life, in order to communicate with us in the spirit realm. That somehow, whether it be through guides, guardians, or just the universal language of energy, non-English speakers can give English messages in the spirit realm.
And maybe they learn it from watching TV.
Yeah, because when I was under the Estes, Jaren had asked if the spirit had ever was watching TV with them. And we didn't really get any response from that. And so he followed up with, do you know what a TV or do you know what a television is? And while I was under, I replied, I don't know, from the Estes. So I think that was a direct response of maybe they do watch the TV, but they don't know what it's called.
Also, while we're in the living room, we're using the REM pod. And one of the questions that I asked Rochelle while she was still under was, is that you pressing those buttons? And her response was no, yes. And then I asked, can you press them again? And she said, can't.
Yeah, so the buttons on the REM pod are light up. They're not ones that you can actually press. So maybe that was what they were responding to, was that they could press the antenna, but not the buttons. Who knows? Again, this one has a lot of evidence that's up for interpretation. So with some of the messages that we got in the attic about, possibly wanting to hurt one of the roommates, we did continue to follow up throughout the investigation about, did they like us? Were there any issues? So while Rochelle was under the Estes in the living room, one of the guests had asked, do you like us? And the response that Rochelle said was you. So maybe they were playing favorites. Maybe.
Yeah, it was Jaren that asked, so.
Yeah, so Jaren being one of the people who lived in the house, maybe they liked him, but they didn't like some of the other roommates. I guess ghosts can have their favorites too.
That was it for the living room. And then we went to the bathroom.
The closed toilet seat bathroom. And I went under the Estes at that point. One of the first line of questioning was whether or not there was an entity there that had opened the shower doors. And the response that I gave was, I did. And then Jaren had an experience earlier before we had arrived where there was a can that was knocked over. So he had asked, were you the one who knocked over the can while I was in here? And I replied with, I did.
Also, while we were asking questions, Jaren had asked, do you like my... And before he could finish his sentence, she said, love it. So he didn't even get a chance to finish his question.
Yeah, so the spirits definitely loved whatever it was that he was going to ask about.
Which we still have no idea what it was because we never asked.
Right. When I came out of the Estes, so took the blindfold off, took the headphones off, there was a moment where Rochelle had told us about some things from her past and that I had given a very personal, meaningful message to her about part of her history that I didn't know about before. And so she was very grateful to have received a good, positive response about some of her history and her ancestors. So that was definitely a good moment for all. So with that, we ended the investigation, and Rochelle and I had talked about me coming back at some point to do a house blessing for the kids.
Which at this particular place, I don't think they needed, because whatever was there seemed pretty cooperative and friendly.
Except for to that one roommate, but we did keep in contact with them, and that roommate was never hurt or never harmed in any way. So, it could have just been that they didn't particularly like that one kid, but they didn't have the ability to manifest any type of harm. But as part of what we do, I am more than happy to bless any house or business after an investigation, especially if there's any residual activity that gets kicked up. And we don't charge for any of those services. There are some grifters out there that will say, oh, you have a curse, and if you pay me $5 million, I'll remove the curse for you. And for me personally, we will never find something that needs to be removed and you have to pay us to remove it. There are mediums out there who provide a service and charge for those services at a reasonable rate. There are tarot readers who charge for their services, and I support them 100%.
But there are a lot of scammers as well.
Exactly. So if anybody ever says you have something wrong with you and only I can remove it and it's going to cost an unreasonable amount of money, run the other way and email us, obsidianparanormal@gmail.com, if you want somebody's opinion, and we'll help you out if we can. But I have to say, for this investigation, having those real-time responses with the Estes, that really made this one a stellar investigation. So, Myron, what do you think? Do you think that the college house is haunted?
I would say based on the responses we got, I would say it's safe to say that. This was a fun one, actually. I like this one. And they were very cooperative, so.
And I feel like there are some properties, like we said in the beginning, that running water, sometimes, if they're on a particular rock or crystal as the foundation, can amplify some of that activity. Like the Blue House Bagels amplified the activity that allowed my father to come through. I feel like this particular house kind of amplified some of the energies that we brought with us. And I think it's a safe place to live. I think it's a beautiful home in a great area. Yes, there was some activity, but nobody was harmed. And I don't think anybody who lives there now should worry about being harmed. So what's on the schedule for our next investigation?
Yeah, our next episode is going to be on the Old 76 House Tavern is it Tappan or Tappan? Tappan, I think it is.
Tappan, I think.
New York.
If you're from New York, you can correct us. Let us know. Did we pronounce that right? I think it would be Tappan because it was the Tappan Zee Bridge, which is now the Mario Cuomo Bridge, but forever be the Tappan Zee. So I'm going to go with Tappan.
Yeah, it sounds safe.
And you can find us all over social media at Obsidian Paranormal. Please like, subscribe, share this with your friends if you like what we have to say. This is how we grow. We so appreciate all of our regular visitors. If you want to submit your own personal ghost story to us, I've said our email a couple times on this episode. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks. And until then, stay spooky.